Big 12 Championship. Arlington, Texas. Tomorrow, Iowa State yet again finds itself in a new biggest game of the season so far. Thus far, the Cyclones have yet to disappoint under the pressure of big games, succeeding against a rival who shall not be named early in the season, and securing what is among the largest wins, if not the biggest win in program history against the Purple Kitties last week. But tomorrow, Iowa State has a chance to earn the first title of the new Big 12, a league in need of a new power broker in the absence of Oklahoma and Texas. Media partner Fox has shown a bit of favoritism toward Iowa State among other Big 12 teams over the course of the 2024 season. And with TNT entering the fray of Big 12 coverage in 2025, a conference championship in the first year of the new Big 12 creates a much shorter path to being a perennial top dog. This team has already helped shape public perception of how Iowa State fits into the conference, and every game from here on out in the 2024 season only serves to benefit the appeal of the Cyclones. The future is bright in Ames. Today is Friday, December 6th. I'm Matt Menson, and welcome to the Cornfield Sports Pod. Blake, always good to have you on the Cornfield Sports Pod.
Yeah,
my favorite co-host ever.
Oh well,
We're casually offering, the best sports commentary that 30,000 some students at Iowa State have to offer.
Yeah, much better than a lot of others I've seen, like student led. It's like, gosh,
we do it right here. We cover everything, and we cover it well. We got a ton of football to talk about today with the conference championships being played this weekend here.
Matt, this is probably the most football I've ever seen.
This is going to be
I've ever seen you.
It's going to be a very football heavy. Well, I was writing this on 3 espresso shots this morning. I was wired. But yeah, we got a lot of football to talk about. This is going to be a very, very heavy football episode. And of course, the perfect place to start. Massive win in Farmageddon last week.
I'm glad I was proven wrong last week. First of all, because
you had the other team winning it now, didn't you?
Because I was expecting disappointment.
And here I picked the spread of the game exactly.
Yeah,
I called it by 8 points. I was right.
I'm glad I can have that celebratory mindset instead of disappointment in my end.
Yep. I missed the over under. I'll give it that. I missed the over under. I nailed the spread right on the nose.
Nice.
But this one, definitely a game for the history books. First 10-win season in school history. Big milestone for Iowa State. We earned ourselves a field rush for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that was a terrific way to have our last. For me as a senior, that was a last home game for me.
Yeah, me too. And I was already on the field anyway.
I was gonna say, you weren't in the student section; you were working.
Yeah, I was working the documentary, so I was on the field anyway. But great privilege to capture you guys, all the celebrations.
Yeah, I was gonna say to end the season that way, just absolutely special. And of course, our season ain't done. It might be done at Jack Trice, but it's not done.
No,
because the team is currently in Arlington. And they kick off at 11 a.m. tomorrow. But in Farmageddon, one of the things that was paramount for Iowa State to win this game, and we weren't sure if it was going to happen, was Iowa State being able to limit the effectiveness of the K-State run game. Giddens was limited to 72 yards on 14 carries, so keeping him from really even sniffing 100 was really good by our defense. Avery Johnson had 64 yards on 13 carries. He took off a lot, which was not particularly helpful for us, but we were able to mostly keep them contained. So with a dual threat quarterback, well, I shouldn't even say dual threat. He's more of a running back that happens to throw every now and then because he had more carries and completed passes. But I'd still like to see better run defense from Iowa State, but this one was passable. Kansas State has a good run game, and we were able to suppress them enough.
Just glad we were able to improve off of the UCF game.
Oh, absolutely, and Texas Tech.
Yeah,
and the Jayhawks. Between K-State and Utah, our run defense has improved drastically. One of the big things that really helped us out with this one, we were able to force fumbles as well early on. I guess both of those fumbles were on passes. One of them was a backwards pass, but it was intended to be a forward pass.
The one at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, the one that was from the very first play from scrimmage.
The people on the Fox broadcast were saying, like, that's not the right call. It was like, well,
it was. It was a backwards pass. It was a backwards pass. It was. They don't have to like it, but it's true. And then our run defense did just enough. Our pass defense was very difficult to break for K-State. Johnson got some decent yards, but he completed less than 50% of his passes. He was 12 for 28. So that coverage, it kept Johnson confused, and it really led to some poor decision-making on his part, and that's what ended up leading to late in the game in that fourth quarter, we had the 22-yard safety.
Yeah, I was going to say, when are we going to mention that?
It's laughable. That might be the single dumbest safety I've ever seen.
Well, you see all the coaching staff on our end is like, ooh.
They were our coaches were just full of joy on seeing that one because nobody expects a 22-yard safety, but that kind of decision making is remarkably boneheaded.
Mm-hmm. There was that,
and it was really more of a 30-yard safety because Johnson was 8 yards deep in the end zone too.
Exactly.
He ran backwards 30 yards,
and then you see him throw. I was like, "Where's that going to?" It went straight for the Iowa State bench.
Yeah, well, it didn't go straight for the Iowa State bench because it landed in play. So with a throwaway, there's 3 check boxes that you have to check. You got to be outside the tackle box. The ball has to get in front of the line of scrimmage, and it has to go out of bounds. I'm not sure. I don't think he was in the tackle box, but he definitely did not check the other 2 boxes. So, and he might have been in the tackle box. I would have to go back and look at the video. I don't think he was, but maybe upon taking another look, he might have been in it, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think he was, though. Off my own recollection, without having a clip in front of me here.
It was that and the blocked field goal attempt that just made the Iowa State bench go nuts, especially Campbell.
Yeah, we really did capitalize on their missed opportunities between the 2 fumbles and the safety and the blocked field goal. K-State made a lot of mistakes that they didn't need to make. It was a little bit fluky, but when you make 4 serious errors like that over the course of the game, now it's not fluky anymore. It's a pattern. So those kind of plays in any other game, yeah, they are fluky. But in this situation, I don't think you can actually call them fluky anymore when they happen that often. Our offense was not really humming like usual, but at the same time, it didn't have to be because we capitalized off of the K-State miscues. The first 2 ISU touchdowns happened after the 2 K-State fumbles. They were both early in the game that set the tone for a game that felt like it was more dominant for Iowa State, even though the box score probably shows it being more dominant for K-State based on total yards. But again, K-State missed backwards pass on that first play from scrimmage. The second fumble happened on their second play of the 4th drive of the game. They shot themselves in the foot early and often. And then, of course, the 3rd ISU touchdown of the game occurred in the second quarter, giving us 24 points after the PAT. We'd had an additional field goal earlier on. That put us over the amount of points that K-State would score throughout the entirety of the game. So we had it won by halftime. And it's a good thing that our defense was able to hold because our offense actually was kind of inept in the second half. We only generated 3 offensive points off of a single Kyle Conradi kick, which followed that Avery Johnson safety.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Then later in the game, Kyle Conradi had a missed field goal, so the offense did get a little bit going there, but not much going on the offensive side of the ball in the second half there.
Yeah, I'm just glad defense was able to hold true, like in the fourth quarter, especially.
The defense was the story of the game, though.
It was.
Again, We recovered 2 fumbles. We blocked a kick. We got the safety. That's a lot of miscues for the defense to force. And the coverage downfield was really good. Again, we held Avery Johnson to 12 of 28 passing. Yeah, maybe he got 3 touchdowns, but if you can't complete 50% of your passes, that's a pretty good formula to not win games. And then you got, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to say here about the field storming in the notes here.
Nah, just got a whole section on the field storming, which I can go into a little bit more detail on it. So like when the field storm actually happened, this is when I actually saw why Jamie Pollard and like the conference pushed to move it like over to the side a little bit, because it was very well organized, like other than the previous Oklahoma State one in 2021. In this case, I'll quote Locked On Big 12 because he was at this game and like had a hell of a time too.
You're quoting Drake Toll.
Yes.
Oh boy.
So he saw that we weren't really focused on like trashing K-State players. Like we were just focused on us just having a great time, and most
of us were focused on trying to tear the goalposts down,
mm-hmm. which that didn't happen.
No,
because too many cops in the area.
Because I guess at Iowa State, our athletics department is fun haters, and this is why the SEC thinks they're better than us.
Or maybe they just want to save a little bit of money.
Yeah, well, you know what? Our taxes and our ticket money and our tuition dollars are paying for those field goal posts. Those are ours. They belong to us. But I guess I guess maybe the donors have some claim too. I don't know if any of the donors stormed the field, but you know, if any of them did.
I mean, any in Sukup or Jack Trice Club.
Sukup maybe. Jack Trice Club probably not.
They'd probably have to walk a little ways.
Yeah, that'd be a little bit more difficult. But I mean, Sukup would be pretty easy. That wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
But
Matt, what's next?
We need to talk about these college football playoff rankings.
Absolutely absurd.
These are ridiculous. Maybe we need to go back to doing some CSP rankings on our own CSP poll, because we did them before the couple of weeks leading up to the college football playoff rankings. And once the college football playoff rankings started coming out, we stopped doing them. But my goodness, the CFP manipulating strength of schedule by ranking teams that shouldn't be ranked. Missouri has no business in the poll, my goodness. And again, these manipulated strength of schedule, it favors the Big Ten and the SEC because they're ranking Big Ten and SEC teams that have no business being ranked. Here's a question for you. Why isn't 9-3 Duke touching the rankings? Or here's a more important question. Why isn't Syracuse being given the respect they deserve? They are finally in the rankings for the first time after this week. 9-3 Syracuse. They have as many top 20 wins as Alabama and South Carolina and Ole Miss, and more top 20 wins than Illinois and Missouri combined. Oh, yeah, and by the way, it should be more top 20 wins than Alabama because Missouri should not be a top 20 win. But for some reason, the CFP has them ranked at 19. Just atrocious. But, of course, Cuse gets ranked behind these two teams. Well, I should say behind all of them, except for Duke, because they lack one thing that the SEC and Big Ten teams have: brand power. That's it. That's the advantage that the SEC and Big Ten teams have over Syracuse right now. That is it.
And it
if you do a blind resume comparison, Syracuse is like the number 16 team in the country.
Yeah. And this happened last year too, with like Florida State getting out of the college football playoff, like in Alabama taking over.
It's absurd, absolutely absurd, and it has nothing to do with the product on the field.
Yeah, exactly. Like brand.
It has to do with who's bringing in the most money.
Yeah, brand power with Alabama like easily took over Florida State.
Mm-hmm. But even more than the disrespect that's going to the ACC right now, the Big 12 disrespect is just asinine. If you look at blind resume comparisons, there have been a lot of blind resume comparison polls out there on social media lately. BYU is winning these blind resume comparisons against Miami and the 3-loss SEC schools. And we're not talking about Missouri here because no one's doing a blind resume comparison against Missouri. BYU is going to wallop them in that. We're talking about Alabama, Ole Miss, Carolina. BYU is winning blind resume comparisons with them. And blind polling based on the BYU resume, not in comparison to other teams, has most people ranking BYU in about that 10 to 12 range. Enough to be contending for an at-large bid in the college football playoff. And right now, they sit at 18 behind 3-loss ACC team Clemson. A Clemson team that looks abnormally weak this year. It's certainly the weakest Clemson team we've seen probably in a while. Maybe there's an exception in there somewhere, but it's not a great Clemson team. So that's one Big 12 team snubbed here. No, all of the Big 12 teams snubbed are 2-loss teams. They all deserve to be better than where they are ranked because they're all sitting behind these 3-loss SEC teams that don't deserve to be up there. The second one, though, our opponent in the Big 12 championship, Arizona State. Their resume includes a win over an SEC team. Now, granted, it is Mississippi State.
Yeah.
So take that as you will, take it with a grain of salt. But they only have 2 losses, and their losses are not as egregious as Alabama's 2 worst losses. And yet the Tide are slated for an at-large bid in the CFP, and Sparky isn't. 10 points to Cincinnati is not as bad of a loss as Alabama being completely incapable of scoring a touchdown against Oklahoma in what is probably the worst Oklahoma team of the last decade and a half.
And Vanderbilt.
And yet, losing to Texas Tech is not as damaging of a loss as losing to Vanderbilt should be. And then, don't forget, Alabama also has that 3rd loss to Tennessee. They're totally riding on a win against Georgia that is not as strong as it would have been in the previous few years, and they darn near blew it. And then a nearly identical argument can be made for Iowa State against Alabama. You swap out Cincinnati and Kansas, and that's about the only difference in that argument. So for the sake of comparing against other teams here, because there's other teams other than Alabama that we should be comparing against, let's compare them against Ole Miss this time. Ole Miss lost against Kentucky, who is a far and away worse than any of the other losses we've mentioned so far. Kentucky managed to lose to every other SEC opponent they faced. So that's a really, really bad loss. And Ole Miss also lost to a questionable Florida team who, even though Florida actually found a way to go bowling this year, they still want Billy Napier fired because they don't trust him. Florida's not that good of a team. They just got lucky. And then let's not forget that Arizona State and Iowa State also earned another thing that Alabama and Ole Miss didn't: the right to play in a Power 4 conference championship.
Yeah, and this is what Brett Yormark has said repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. It's like these teams should not be higher ranked than the winner of our Power 4 conference.
They have no right being higher ranked than the runner-up.
Yeah, exactly.
They have no – Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss have no business whatsoever being in the conversation for the college football playoff.
Yeah, and Brett
Yormark, I don't have to compare our teams against South Carolina because if I can compare them against Alabama and Ole Miss, both of those teams hold head-to-head over South Carolina, and because they have similar record, there is no way you can justify putting South Carolina ahead of those two.
No, exactly. Brett Yormark also went after Boise State's ranking in there.
Lack of any semblance of actual schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they struggled against was it 2 or 3 win Wyoming? Yeah. I don't know about that one.
And they've only played against like one powerhouse team, and that's Oregon.
Right, and that was at the very beginning of the season when Oregon was playing at their worst. Oregon did not look like the number 1 team in the country back then. That was also when Oregon almost got upset by Idaho. So, yeah, real great look having the loss at that point in the season. And by the way, I don't know how many times I need to keep saying this. There is no such thing as a quality loss. It doesn't exist. It's a made-up term to allow the media to keep jostling along the SEC and Big Ten bias so they don't have to drop the teams when they lose. No such thing as a quality loss.
Man, it's just the old guys making decisions for us at this point.
It is. We need a actual objective system in order to determine these teams. Because otherwise, what we have right now is we've got a committee in a smoke-filled room with no transparency that moves the goalposts in order to get the teams that they want in. Because if we hold Iowa State and Alabama to the same standards, Iowa State they have a significantly better resume than Alabama this year. And you know what? I don't care about the hypothetical matchups because those didn't happen. They're made up. They're not real. You understand how that works? We determine who gets into the playoff based on what actually happened on the gridiron, not about some hypotheticals, because the SEC is undefeated in hypothetical matchups. But hypothetical matchups don't win you championships. Actual action on the gridiron does. So I don't care about your hypotheticals. Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina have absolutely no business being in the conversation for the college football playoff. They don't deserve to be there, and they haven't for a while. Now,
Deep breath.
back to talking about Power 4 conference championships here.
That both of these teams should deserve to be in the college football playoff.
Both of these teams, as it currently stands, deserve to be in there. We'll see what ends up happening across these games here. We got the Mountain West Championship tonight and then P4 tomorrow. But the Big 12 title game versus Arizona State, we got to break this down. This may be the most run-heavy game we see from Arizona State all year. They are going to be having to rely on it more heavily because leading receiver for Arizona State, Jordyn Tyson, is not playing. And he has more receiving yards than ASU's next three receivers combined, including running back Cam Scadaboo. So if Iowa State can successfully force ASU into passing situations with their less than mediocre receivers against the best secondary in the Big 12, that is absolutely a winning formula for the Iowa State defense. Because if we can make them play with their weakness against our strength, if we can force them to rely on that because the running game is not going to be fast enough, we're in a really, really good spot. So yeah, Cam Scadaboo and Sam Levitt are going to have to try to do more to hurt the Iowa State defense on the ground. And Blake, it is still the weak point of Iowa State's defense.
I'd say so.
We've seen some growth in the last 2 weeks. I talked about this before. Against Utah and K-State, we stopped the run a little bit better than we had been before. But against ASU, we need our run defense to be solid early to give our offense a chance to get ahead and force Arizona State to try to play some tempo to pass the ball more. And the offense has to answer the call when they do get the ball. They've got to be potent. They've got to force ASU to play fast. Tempo is an advantage for Iowa State in this game. The closer the game, the longer Arizona State can rely on Scadaboo to do the heavy lifting. If our offense can find ways to pull away with some early touchdowns, the pressure will take ASU off of their game plan because they are going to have to try to avoid passing the ball. If we put them in situations where they have to pass the ball, if they start getting behind, they're going to have to pass the ball to try to catch up faster. You know, if we can get them into some third and long, second and long, third and long, those are passing downs. That's an advantage for us. So we need to do everything we can to force them into passing situations. And then conversely, that style of play is favorable for us when we're on the offensive side of the ball. Because the ASU pass defense is just kind of middle of the pack in the Big 12. And ISU has the only wide receiver duo in the nation where both receivers have 1,000 yards. Only one. We got weapons. And if we use them right, we can win this game pretty easily.
We have to use them right, though.
Yeah, we do have to use them right. But Mauser's been figuring this thing out as the season's gone on. We're looking a lot better. So, yeah, if we're keeping tally here, that means we have not one, but 2 more 1,000-yard receivers in Arizona State in this game. So I expect the Iowa State offense to be considerably more potent with more weapons available than the Arizona State offense does. And I think that means that we can win this game by gashing Sparky through the air. So with that, the FanDuel spread on this game is Arizona State -1.5, over under 49.5. Blake, what's your pick?
I have ISU covering, and they hit the over. I have them winning by a field goal, 24-21, Iowa State.
Yep. I also have Iowa State covering the spread. I also have the over hitting. I think that this is a really low over-under, and the totals have been brought down after opening at 51.5, but the majority of the money is going to the over. 58% is going to the over. I think that's worth noting. The majority of the spread money is going to Arizona State right now, and I think the lack of Jordyn Tyson will make their offense too one-dimensional to have that kind of success that they usually do. So Iowa State can commit more resources to stopping the run game than they otherwise would need to. I don't know if a lot of bettors are aware that Jordyn Tyson is not playing, but that would make a huge difference because the lines react to the market. The Iowa State offense, at the same time, is not dealing with any major gaps that we haven't already dealt with successfully. That said, not only do I think Iowa State covers the spread in this game, I think we win it outright, and I think we win it very solidly. I've got Iowa State 31, Arizona State 20. This game, tomorrow, 11 a.m., ABC. Winner take all for a spot into the college football playoff.
Can't be more simple than that. Win and you're in.
Win and you're in. Outside the Big 12, best case scenario, we got to talk about these other conference games real quick because they are going to affect how things play out for the Big 12 conference champion, which we really hope is us. So for the ACC, this is the one that has the most leniency. The other ones are pretty cut and dry. For the ACC, the best case scenario is that SMU beats Clemson, eliminating the possibility of a bid steal because SMU is probably in the playoff regardless of what happens in this game. It's just a matter of whether or not they get the bye. But if Clemson wins, the SEC is almost certainly getting 2 teams in. Or not the SEC, the ACC is almost certainly getting 2 teams in. Otherwise, they more than likely only get 1. So SMU winning would also elevate the value of the Big 12 contender because of BYU's win against SMU. That elevates the value of a BYU win. And BYU obviously not playing in the Big 12 championship, but you know who played BYU here at the end of the regular season? Arizona State did. So the better BYU looks, the better that win for Arizona State looks. And that makes Arizona State look like a better team. So regardless of who wins the Big 12 championship, it makes the winner look better because it makes Arizona State look better regardless. And then if Iowa State wins it, then it makes Iowa State look better too. And then the caveat with this is that if UNLV manages to beat Boise State and Clemson beats SMU, that opens a path for the Big 12 to get the highest possible seed for them at number 3. They're not going to get that number 1 or number 2 seed, I don't think. I don't see any path for that. Right now, the committee is giving more respect to both of the Big 12 contenders than Clemson. So I think regardless, if Clemson wins the Big 12 championship, the Big 12 championship winner will be ranked ahead of Clemson. For the SEC, best case scenario, I know you don't want to hear it because we don't like this team. But the best case scenario is Texas beating Georgia because Georgia has barely managed to skate by against and lose against some inferior opponents, most notably getting taken to the wire by Kentucky early and going to 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech. And then they also have the losses to Alabama and Ole Miss. So I think it's unlikely that the committee would choose to punish Georgia very much for a loss to Texas. And as much as we'd like for them to have, their third loss in their conference championship, we would like that to allow the Big 12 champion to pass them. If the Big 12 champion is unable to secure a bye, I don't think that it's going to happen. I think that it should happen because Georgia hasn't been consistent across the entire season. But we know how the committee works, and so that won't be that way. But it at least opens up the ability to argue that point and to drive and to counter some of this SEC narrative. If Georgia wins the game, there's no way we can do that. But it would also show degradation late in the season for Georgia because Georgia was able to beat Texas by multiple possessions the first time in Austin. And then you go to almost blowing it to Georgia Tech, and I believe that was in Sanford Stadium. And then if you lose to Texas after that, that's a little bit of a fall from grace for the Bulldogs. So that's what we need in the SEC. A Texas win is good for the Big 12 in the SEC. In the Big 10, it is best if Oregon beats Penn State. The Big 12 champion, again, and this is a similar situation that Georgia won, only it's actually a more difficult argument. It doesn't mean I don't think it doesn't exist. I think the Big 12 champion does have a case to be made that it has a better resume than Penn State if Penn State loses. Now, Penn State admittedly has less damaging losses. Their losses are not particularly damaging at all, Ohio State and Oregon. And so I think I probably still would rank Penn State ahead of them. This is actually one that I think the Big 12 champion has an argument to make, but I think they lose that argument. The Nittany Lions, they do lack any impressive wins and have lost against all of their ranked opponents except an overrated Illinois team. Whereas, the winner of the Big 12 championship game will automatically have a solid win in the Big 12 championship. And then if you're Arizona State, you also have that win against BYU, which is a good look. And then, the other advantage in comparison between Big 12, Big 10 runner-up, Big 12 champion, SEC runner-up is that, you actually have the P4 conference championship, something that the committee says it's supposed to be considering. And then, of course, the Mountain West. Probably the most important of them for the Big 12, outside of the Big 12 one itself. If UNLV beats Boise State, which is exactly what we need, this effectively eliminates the Mountain West from contention for a first-round bye, clearing the path for the Big 12 champion to not have to worry about where it stands compared to the at-large teams. Now, furthermore, outside of the individual championships, but as a collective here, if Oregon, Texas, and SMU all win their conference championships, what does that have in common, Blake?
Tell me.
None of them were in the conference last year. They're all newcomers.
Yes, because Texas, coming from the Big 12, basically the Big 12 is winning the SEC.
Right, you essentially have a Big 12 team winning the SEC, an American Athletic team winning the ACC, and a Pac-12 team winning the Big 10. What's that tell you? There's a lot more parity between these conferences than the media and the Big 10 and the SEC want you to think. Because if you can have another team from a different conference come in and take over, your team, your conference is not as powerful as you thought it was before.
Makes you think.
It really does. New teams in each conference winning the conference titles, it strengthens the argument that the conferences are not particularly separated in terms of power. It shatters the narrative that the SEC and the Big 10 are worlds better. All right, that's our football content.
That is the most football I've ever talked about in a consistent level.
We had a lot there.
But that was great.
Yeah, some of these other ones are going to be a lot more brief. We don't have as much to talk about for some of them. Volleyball, this segment ought to be short. Loss versus Kansas last Friday. Last game of the season. They didn't make anything for the postseason. They had a chance to win every set that they lost. And then they, didn't actually. Yeah. Yeah. When you have as many set points as we did in set 4, there was no excuse for dropping that set. We should have been able to force the 5th set. We actually went on an 8-0 run late in the set to force a set point with a score of 24-20. And then we allowed KU to knot it up at 24s. We then proceeded to earn 2 more set points, but we were never able to capitalize on it. So, yeah, we sacrificed 6 set points. 6 set points that we couldn't score on.
In the 4th set or all together?
In the 4th set.
That's insane.
It was absolutely atrocious. When the pressure's on, the team was not there. And then late in the game, this was bad in set 4 too. The hitting errors once again caught up with us. I feel like a broken record talking about hitting errors every single week. But my goodness, it has been an issue this year.
Matt, this is the last time we're talking about it.
Until spring ball.
That's right.
When was the last game that we didn't that we had? Or sorry, when was the last game that we had less hitting errors than the other team?
Could it have been against Texas Tech?
Maybe. I thought we had the same number of hitting errors as them against Texas Tech. It's been too long. It has not been good.
Yeah, I just thought like Texas Tech, like we performed so much better against Texas Tech than most.
For some reason, we had their number this year. But in this game here on Friday, ISU ended up with 7 more errors than Kansas. And Kansas only had 2 errors apiece in sets 2 and 3. Accurate hitting wins games. Errors lose games. And that's pretty much the story of the Cyclone offense this season. Iowa State should not have let set 1 get as close as it ended up being late. The Clones allowed an 8-1 Kansas run, which temporarily flipped the lead in favor of the Jayhawks. And then we were able to get back ahead. Set 2, for most of it, actually went almost identically to set 1. Only Kansas flipped the score at 22-21 for the second time in the match. And this time, KU didn't let ISU get back in front. And then after that, it was chalk. This loss ended the season for the ISU volleyball team. Again, they didn't qualify for anything in the postseason. So the rest of the news for the season for Big 12 volleyball for Iowa State, Brooke Stonestreet and Amira Hendricks-Walker earned all Big 12 second team honors at libero and middle blocker, and then Rachel Van Gorp earned all Big 12 rookie team honors.
Yep.
But that is it for ISU volleyball for the season.
Yeah, and I will say happy to come for the last game and then see Brooke won last time, because Brooke stayed all 4 years and made a great impact too. Had great milestones, like not just with the team but with the Big 12 too. So she was a powerhouse in the Big 12 too.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say to you, thank you for getting me into volleyball. I was not very interested in when I was in high school, because I would film all the volleyball games during high school. It really wasn't my favorite thing. But a year passes in college, I come here, and then here you are just bringing all the hype around volleyball. I film one game, and then I just see you wreaking havoc there. It's all right, it's time to go to a game. We go to Baylor. We go to the volleyball game against Baylor. It's on ESPN2. That's when you debuted the signs there. And
then I started doing signs until I got banned.
Exactly.
Also because of me.
But it's been a great impact too. On my interest in Iowa State sports is especially women's sports too. Just bringing love to volleyball too.
I'm gonna miss this program. After that game, who all was it? there's so many players on the team that asked me if I was gonna be able to come back to games next year because I know Brooke did, Tierney did, Faith and Morgan did, and Nayeli did.
Yeah.
So yeah, five different players asked me if I'm gonna be able to come back to games next year, and
And let's not forget you going to Florida to watch some NCAA volleyball, and you were so close to getting free passes to go to go to the Sweet 16.
I'm gonna miss this team.
We were so close to that.
I'm gonna miss being around ISU volleyball as a student because man, there is a lot of good memories, a lot of great interaction with that team.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of great teams, Iowa State men's basketball right now.
I'm gonna miss that too, and I'm gone. But we're still here.
Win versus number 5 Marquette Golden Eagles
on ESPN Plus. Criminal.
Yeah, that one was brutal.
I just ticked you off.
Yes, you did. Yeah, absolutely awful that game was on ESPN Plus. The production for ESPN Plus, even when they bring in the production trucks, is substandard. They don't have all the floor mics and stuff. It doesn't capture the environment as well.
Mm-mm. They did bring the hoop mics.
Yeah. But again, it does not capture the environment as well as when they do the full setup for their linear broadcasts on ESPN.
Yeah. But
it's just not the same.
You know what else they brought? Or I should mention who else they brought. Rich Hollenberg. Love Rich Hollenberg. He loves Iowa State.
Him and Fran are ESPN's best announcers, and it's not even remotely close.
Nah, exactly. I will say a little biased. They do love Iowa State, but always great to have them with. But
well, they're like the only 2 announcers that ESPN has that doesn't have disdain toward Iowa State.
Yeah, exactly. And Fran Fraschilla wasn't there against Marquette, but he'll be here at some point.
I don't know. After having CBS for 1 game last year, my favorite announcing crew that's ever been in Hilton Coliseum was Bill Raftery, Ian Eagle, and Coach Wright.
Coach Jay Wright.
Coach Wright.
We will be getting CBS on December 15th against Omaha. It'll be on the CBS Sports Network. I'm not sure.
It's not going to be the same crew for that.
It
not for CBS Sports Network.
It won't be the same crew.
Yeah, no, that's Ian Eagle, Bill Raftery, and Coach Wright. That's an over the air on CBS broadcast, like top tier games type of stuff. But Iowa State yet to lose in the Big East battle.
No, exactly. It's like I've been following this for like a couple of years now, and then I look back at the history like since it started at 2019.
We beat Seton Hall in 2019. Had the year off during COVID. 2021 we beat Creighton. 2 years ago we beat St. John's. Last year we beat DePaul. Now we've got Marquette.
Is this the last year for the Big East battle?
I am not aware of it ending, but
Okay. I
would assume if it is the last year on the contract, I would assume it gets extended because the media partners are going to want it, especially Fox.
Yeah. I would hate for this to end. This is great basketball to be watching, especially this past one. With Fox
having an interest in both conferences and them being exclusive with the Big East, and ESPN not driving a conference battle with the Big 12 because they're driving SEC, ACC. I don't see Big 12, Big East ending anytime soon. But the game itself, we beat Marquette by 11. Covered the spread. Good teams win, great teams cover. But Keyshawn Gilbert, have yourself a game, my guy.
We say Keyshawn Gilbert a lot, especially this season.
Key had a game.
He did, though. My gosh.
Dude had 17 points at halftime, and he was 1 point shy of his career total.
Yep. 24 points to total, and towards the end of the game, he left the game a little bloody on his face, and just like me again.
Then he came back wearing a linebacker's number on a different jersey.
Yeah. And I heard fans on Twitter were calling for both jerseys to be retired.
How about we put both jerseys in a washing machine first?
Yeah. But number 10 did come out clean.
They put it in a washing machine?
With that, they must have like scrubbed it a bunch, because in
some good old shout gel.
Yeah, because my internship had a clubhouse manager, and then what he had to do was
like, just show him cleaning the jersey out.
Yeah, because he had to scrub every stain, like all the dirt
That's
stains
crazy.
in baseball. My gosh,
that's crazy.
I would hate that, but I was roommates with a guy. He worked so hard this summer.
Yep.
I interned. He was great.
Anyway, outside of Keyshawn Gilbert, he was not the only one who had himself a game. Joshua Jefferson, dude stepped up when it counted. He had a double-double, points, rebounds. But he played a fantastic game, and if he keeps playing like that, he's really going to step into his own this year. He is going to be a menace at that number 4 spot. As a stretch 4, he's going to be a menace for other Big 12 teams to deal with because he is bigger than most players in the 4 slot.
Big Dog did
at most schools, Joshua Jefferson would be a 5.
Yeah. I was gonna say Big Dog did good too.
Yeah, Big Dog did good. I do want to see a little bit better rebounding from Brandon Chatfield. I thought Brandon was tipping the ball a little bit too much and was having trouble actually securing boards.
That did happen a lot.
And that resulted in some going out of bounds that probably shouldn't have, and resulted in Marquette getting the ball back. Ultimately ended up not making a difference in the game because he still won by double digits. But I want to see your hands get a little bit stickier there, Chatfield. Outside of our game, the remainder of the AP top 5, I have it written here. They had a tough week. They honestly just had a tough night because they kind of all simultaneously collapsed, with the exception of one team. But it cleared the path for the Cyclones to make a big jump in the rankings. Kansas, Auburn, and Kentucky all lost. So that's 1, 2, and 4. Marquette was 5. So 4 out of the top 5 teams lost. That leaves Iowa State and Tennessee as the only teams in the top 6 to not have a loss this week. Tennessee is still undefeated. They should jump to the top of the poll. They don't play again until after Monday anyway.
So where does that leave Iowa State and Auburn?
This is a difficult one to sort out, and I think that I don't think that the voters in the AP are going to necessarily agree on this one. Auburn's loss to Duke at Cameron Indoor is not a particularly damaging loss, but it should still be more damaging than our loss in Maui to Auburn because they lost by more. And Duke is not as good of a team as Auburn is. So because we played a better team closer, our loss should be less damaging. Notice I'm not calling it a quality loss. It's not. There's no such thing. But it's less damaging. Auburn's head-to-head win against us, though, should still carry some weight, though, in the minds of the voters. Head-to-head wins do have to matter. And so when you try to weigh those two factors here, I'd be shocked if there's anything close to a consensus in putting either team in front of the other, and the vote count should be very close. The other thing is, keeping Auburn ranked ahead of Iowa State likely requires not dropping them in the rank at all, because Kansas had a much worse loss after losing to unranked Creighton. So I think Kansas, no matter what happens, falls behind Auburn.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't see how you can justify putting Kansas ahead of Iowa State right now when Iowa State has a better win and a loss that's considerably less damaging.
Yeah. Definitely. Shout out Creighton.
So the only way to keep Auburn from passing Iowa State now is to not drop Auburn at all from that number 2 spot and just have Tennessee jump them. And that seems like very unlikely behavior because the AP does not usually do that. What they usually do is they reward teams that win and they let them climb the rankings, and teams that lose drop. It's not a full body of work type of thing. It's what have you done for me lately? So this is how I think the top 10 is going to end up shaking out after this week. I think at the top you got Tennessee. I think that's I think that's the easiest one to justify. They're undefeated. They've got marquee wins. Number 2, I think ends up being us. I think we ride through the chaos. We survive the chaos unscathed. Number 3, Gonzaga. Gonzaga was sitting at number 7. They were sitting at number 7. They were right behind us. They also just earned a quality win against Indiana. They did not fall victim to the chaos either. So I think that gives them grounds to climb up. At number 4, you have Auburn. At number 5, Kansas. At number 6, Kentucky. At number 7, you have Duke, who just beat Auburn. But with their head-to-head losses against Kansas and Kentucky, it's very, very difficult to justify placing them over those two. At number 8, entering the top 10, I've got Oregon, who is still undefeated and stands to capitalize from that chaos above them. At 9, I think you got to give the nod to Alabama. They just earned a win versus 20th ranked North Carolina. And then at 10 is where I have Marquette falling to. So Iowa State's next game here is kind of meaningless. It's against Jackson State. They're 0-9. We have very little to prove in this game. If anything, this is probably a good game to give Taman some rest so that he can be closer to full strength on Thursday. Because on Thursday, we have a game that actually matters. We are going to the Carver Library Arena that rushed the court with like 50 fans against Northwestern earlier this week for Cyhawk.
Against Fran McCaffrey and the team out east.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying this might be the most hostile environment we'll see. So they'll actually sell this game out.
Well, it's Cyhawk, so that's
right. That's why they're going to sell it out. It's Cyhawk.
Mm-hmm.
They care too much about us. We're their Super Bowl. So yeah, you're probably right about that being the most hostile environment we see until we play at Bramlage Coliseum and Allen Fieldhouse.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've won in the Forbidden City. That said, this Iowa team does not scare me in the slightest, and our team this year might actually be the best Iowa State team we've had since Pfizer and Tinsley went to the Elite Eight.
Yeah. I'm not scared like after our performance in Maui and especially against Marquette.
And how we just bullied Marquette.
Yeah.
I am not scared of the team out east at all.
No. But I will dive into the Cyhawk series as it stands right now, since I go over that so much.
It's important.
It is. So Iowa State currently
we count the series as a whole.
Yes.
We admit that last year we lost the series. We're not arguing over which sports are more important in order to say how we won it every year or something like that. That's what the team out east does. They move the goalposts. We're consistent out here.
Yeah.
We count the series as it's scored, the whole series.
Mm-hmm. And we're proud of that.
Football is worth 3 points. Every other sport is worth 2.
Yep. So Iowa State currently sits 9-4 against the team out east. So Iowa State currently has wins against
against the team out east in football, volleyball, and both cross-country teams.
You saved me there.
Yes, I did.
And then
the team out east
has wins in
the sport that doesn't exist.
And wrestling, and the sport that doesn't exist.
You were about to say it.
I was.
And so the winner of the series, in order to actually clinch the series, you got to score 13 points. If we win in both men's and women's basketball, we clinch the series. I think men's basketball is probably a gimme. Women's basketball is looking shakier than it was at the start of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Because our team has not been living up to expectations. They're still showing a lot of youth. And the team out east has been looking better than expected. So, but in the last week for our ladies, they did get 2 wins. The first one was against Middle Tennessee down in that Fort Myers Challenge. They left Florida with 1 W after getting shell-shocked by Carolina. We don't need to go into any more detail on that game. We deliberately avoided it last week because of how rough it was. Crooks had 21 points shooting, 70% from the field, all-tournament team. There's not a whole lot to derive from beating Middle Tennessee, though.
Yeah, honestly.
Same thing with beating the brakes off of USC Upstate. Kelsey Jones had a good offensive game. Why don't we do that more often?
I don't know.
Get her some more shooting opportunities. She can shoot. She was 50% from 3.
We do go over her defense though a lot though.
Oh yeah, she's got the best defense on the team.
Yeah. Yeah, just love to see a little more.
Followed closely by AJ. AJ's got good defense too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Kelsey flies all over that floor. She is fast. But that's a couple wins against dramatically inferior opponents that proved very little. Audie Crooks actually had a double-double by halftime against USC Upstate.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, so that tells you how worthless those wins are.
Yeah.
They prove literally nothing and probably don't serve to move us up the rankings at all. So next for us, that will be against Central Michigan. Which day is that one?
That'll be on Sunday.
Sunday?
It'll be Sunday at noon at ESPN Plus.
Gotcha. And then Wednesday, we play at the Team Out East for women's ball. They have not won in Carver since 2006.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at before we started.
We don't have a particularly great record against the Team Out East in women's ball over the last 2 decades.
No, exactly.
We were on a pretty rough streak until a couple years ago when that Ashley Jones-led team finally beat them in Hilton. But the biggest things to remember, she who must not be named is not playing for them anymore. And then Lisa Bluter is not coaching for them anymore.
But it's still coaching.
Her hand-picked assistant is now head coaching. So there's some continuity there.
Yeah, we can't sleep on Jan Jensen. This is still a great team.
Great-ish.
Great-ish.
We should still be better. I'm not particularly confident about this because I know what the environment's going to be. But our team should be better. Wrestling. Cliff Keen, Las Vegas Invitational. That's where they're at this weekend. I think that starts today.
Yeah, it starts today. What all does that consist of?
It's a multi-team tournament. It's not a dual tournament though. It's typical tournament scoring, same way as the Big 12 or NCAA score. Yeah. So this will be a good opportunity to see how we perform in tournament scoring situations. Because wrestling is a dual team, and how you perform as a dual team is not necessarily going to be the same as how you perform in tournament scoring. But for that, I mean, the biggest ones, Evan Frost is the 2 seed at 133. Anthony Echemendia is the number 3 seed at 149. So we could see some mayhem there at those classes. It'd be kind of nice to see Pinheiro cause some chaos at 157. He's a 5 seed. MJ Gaitan's a 5 seed at 165. And if he's the 5 seed at 165 and he's like the 9th ranked nationally, that 165, and same with 157. 157 and 165 must be stacked. And then Younger Bastida is not going to be wrestling at this one. Daniel Herrera is going to be wrestling at heavyweight.
Do you know why Younger isn't doing it?
I do not.
Okay.
But that is pretty much everything that we have for today's episode of the Cornfield Sports Pod.
Had a powerhouse football coverage today.
Yeah. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at CSportsPod. Blake, where can they find you at?
As always, you can find me at Blake Attack 1846.
And it doesn't change. You can find me at SFMattISU. Tap the follow button on Spotify, plus button on Apple. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. Make sure you hit the little bell for notifications. If you use Amazon, CastBox, or Good Pods for some reason, we're also on those. I don't actually know anybody who uses those, but we are available on them. But yeah.
So nice. This has been Blake Peterson.
I'm Matt Menson, and this has been the Cornfield Sports Pod.